Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for watching this video. In this series of short clips, we are going to discuss about test development process in psychological assessment. So in particular, we are referring to the processes that been introduced or recommended by Cohen et al. 2022. As you know, there are many test development experts who have produced quite a number of reference work. But here we are going to discuss specifically on the 5 phases of test development recommended by Cohen et al. Okay, first, we are going to discuss about test conceptualization. Second, we are going to discuss test construction, followed by test tryout, item analysis, and lastly, we are going to discuss about revision. As I mentioned just now, so we are focusing on the 5 phases of test construction. Okay, so all of these processes can be considered as iterative process, whereby after we manage to conceptualize the test, we are going to proceed to test construction, tryout, item analysis, and revisions. Say for example, we are having problem or challenges when we develop the item. For example, item analysis does not indicate a good criteria, or we have low reliability or low validity, or we have many comments from subject matter expert during content validations. So in this case, we need to revise back the questions. So we may have to go back to the phase 2, which is test construction, and the process goes on and on until we manage to develop an appropriate numbers of test item. So in this case, we are going to discuss one by one, starting from test conceptualizations until test revision. Okay, the first part that we need to discuss is what is the foundation of test development. Okay, the foundation of test development is all discussed in the first stage or first phase of test conceptualization. Okay, test conceptualization in test development is the foundational phase where the framework and objective of an assessment are established. This foundation will cover everything important about the test, about the construct, and about the design of the test itself. So by Cohen, they have introduced 14 strategic questions that test developers need to answer. These 14 questions has been designed to indicate information or to locate information important of the design of the test as well as the construct that we want to measure. So these 14 preliminary questions start with what the test designed to measure. In this case, we refers to what are the construct that we want to measure, whether this is the available established constructs or whether this is a new construct. Second, we need to ascertain whether what is or what are the objective of the test, because we need to be clear whether the test aims for diagnostic purpose. We want to indicate what is the status, we want to know what is the psychological phenomena that this person experience, or for inferential purpose, for research purposes, for examples. And then we need to also respond or need to clarify what is the need for this new test. Because of what? Test development process requires a lot of resources and time consuming. So sometimes there are already available tests in the literature. Okay, there are people who already developed this test. Sometimes these tests can always be applied directly to our context. Okay, for research purpose, for service purpose, for commercial purpose, for example. However, in the case that the test is not exist, or the available tests have a problem in terms of psychometric properties, in terms of its application, suitability in a certain context, for example, then we may need to develop a new test. So here we need to really argue with a proper argument, with appropriate justifications from literature, from expert opinions, whether we need a new test or not. And sometimes, instead of developing new tests, we may explore to adapt the available tests. So there is a proper process that we need to do, whether we need to establish new tests, adapt a new test, or just use the available test. So in this case that we want to develop a new test, we have to make sure that we conduct a proper concept analysis, we conduct a proper evaluations of the available test, so that it justify the resources that we are going to spend, the time that we're going to spend to develop a new test. And then we also need to clarify who is going to use the test, in what context, okay, who will take the test, okay, who will use the test. Sometimes refers to researchers, sometimes to refers to psychologists, clinical psychologists or IO psychologists in the context of their work, for example. And then related to the first questions, number 6, what content will the test cover? Is it the whole concepts that we want to measure, or is just a small concepts? Okay, why we have to answer this? Because there are some psychological concepts which are very broad. For example, well-being. Okay, well-being is very famous concepts in psychology disciplines. However, well-being has been conceptualized in many ways. There are psychological well-being, emotional well-being, subjective well-being, for example. So we need to clarify what are the aspects that we cover. Is it everything, or we only cover psychological well-being, or we only cover emotional well-being in this case? So here, question 1 and question 6. Question 1, what the test designed to measure, and what content will the test cover are interrelated, which are related to the concept that we want to measure. Is it the overall concepts, or is only touched on a specific components or specific domain or specific types of the constructs? So next, we also need to clarify early on in the first phase of test development, how will the test be administered? Is it going to be a traditional paper and pencil test? Is it going to be use certain technology, for example, computer mediators, digitalized test, for example? So we have to determine early on how will the test be administered. So next, test developer need to also clarify early in their test development process what is the ideal format of the test. Okay, when we talk about ideal formats, in this case, test developers and their teams need to explore what are the available format available for them to use. For example, whether they use to open-ended, which in this case they will have to construct response, they will have to require constructed response from their participant. So for example, they ask questions, participants need to answer verbally. Or is a selected response format. In this case, we develop scale, okay, we develop rating, so that our respondent need only to choose which one of their idea of their response or answers that reflects their condition. So in this case, we have to explore, we have to look, we have to analyze available tests which are already being developed by other researchers. If there are no particular tests which is exactly the same, so we can look at some similar tests in the sense that will mix or will be able to support our objective of test development. So next, we need to also clarify as a test developer, should more than one form of the test be developed? Okay, most of the time right now, people only develop one form, but there are also advantage to have more than one form. Okay, if you recall back what we've learned in the topics reliability, so when we have multiple form, for example, we can establish we can establish alternate form of parallel form reliability estimate. So this will also give advantage, and sometimes to minimize the training effects or the practice effects, so we can use another form when we have to re-evaluate or reassess one also the same participant at the second time. So next, we also need to clarify, is there any special trainings which are required for the test user in order for them to administer the new test? Okay, to administer the new test or to interpret the test. Okay, maybe at the undergraduate levels, you are being exposed a lot with free to use tests. Okay, the tests that you can acquire from the testing labs or from the library or from the internet. But they are standardized, commercialized tests which require certain certifications or at least training for us to administer as well as to interpret the test. So I've encountered that there are a couple of training providers that provide trainings on how to administer and interpret MMPI, for example. Okay, this is provided by the publisher themselves. Okay, which is the PSN. So in this case, we need to clarify whether there is a specific requirement for the test user to go through to understand in order for them to properly administer as well as interpret the test score. And next, as a test developer, we also need to clarify what types of responses will be required of test taker. So this is related to questions number 8 previously, where it's related to the test format. Okay, but here we look at how the response formats that we are anticipating. Okay, whether we want to use Likert scale, the most famous, the most widely used scale, or we want to use rating scales, inventory, comparison matchings, or Q-sort. Okay, all those of response range that we have available to choose. Okay, this also depends on what types of construct, what type of concept that we measure. And next, we also need to understand by developing the test who are going to benefit from the test. Okay, and this is also related to the purpose of the test. Is it for diagnostic purpose? Okay, beside the people who want to know their psychological conditions, it may also benefits the organizations that are related. The schools, for example, the organizations, for example, the family members, for example. So we have to identify early on during test conceptualization, the first phase of test development, who are or who is going to benefit from the administration of the test. And next, we also need to clarify, is there any potential harm as the result of administration of this test? Okay, by now, I think you already being exposed that sometimes by undergoing certain procedures refers to testing, that people may develop certain condition. At least, okay, they develops anxiety, okay, they develops worriness, okay, they develops fear, sadness, or anger, for example. So we need to identify, is there any potential harm? Okay, if you are developing a test in the context of working, okay, or organizations, sometimes you develop a test for the worker, but it may give an impact on their career. For example, you develop a counterproductive work behavior assessment scale, for example. So if your respondent answer that, and if they score in a certain way, for example, very low, then they may incur disciplinary actions from their organization, for example. So you have to identify the potential harm for people who are going to administer or answer the test. Okay, and lastly, we also need to clarify how will meaning be attributed to scores of these tests. Okay, the interpretation of these scores. So if you recall, okay, previously we have talked about the norm reference test, the criterion reference test. So these two are the methods whereby test developers and test users can use to interpret, okay, the meaning of the scores based on a certain condition. Okay, if we developing norm reference test, so we must also have the normative table so that we can refer to these tables how to interpret the scores of the test users that we are testing. Or if we are unable to develop the tables, okay, the normative tables, we may need to give a certain criteria, okay, how to interpret the test. For example, passing marks. If the score from certain range to certain range, from 0 to 20, for example, so this is considered as low score. If the score from 21 to 40, for example, this is considered as moderate score. If they score 40 and above, this is considered high score, for example, a certain criteria that helps the test user to interpret the meanings of the test score. So these are the 14 questions which the test developer need to answer, need to clarify early on during test development. Okay, in the first phase, which is test conceptualization. Although these 14 questions are straightforward, okay, which test developer can answer based on their experience, based on their understanding, for examples. But the process is more than depending on a certain thinking and comprehension. It requires a lot. And then there are important part which require a more systematic and rigorous process to address those questions. So I would like to attract your attention to the two questions early on when we discuss the 14 question. Okay, question number 1, what the test designed to measure, and question number 6, what content will the test cover? Okay, so if you read on test development process, you will come across this term, test conceptualizations and construct conceptualizations. Okay, so please do not confuse between these two terminologies. Okay, so for test conceptualizations, it refers to these 14 questions where you not only look at the content, which is the construct that we want to measure, but also you look at overall about the test, the design of the test. Okay, but here I would like to attract your attention to these two questions, question 1 and question 6, about what the test designed to measure and the content of the test. So here it relates to the construct itself. Okay, here I term it as construct clarification. Okay, question number 1 and question number 6 in this instance requires the test developer to clarify the construct that they want to measure. Okay, like I mentioned just now, some books, some article consider it or name it as construct conceptualizations. So these two questions requires test developer to identify, to define, to broaden, or to refine, or to verify the construct of interest. So usually, in normal cases, these constructs are a new phenomena, okay, a new trends, or a new psychological disorders that are coming or they are developed among people. Okay, because there are a lot of tests are being developed, and most of the construct that are available already have their own tests, already have their own scale, they already have their own inventory. Say for examples, when you want to integrate some elements, some cultural elements or some religious elements in the already established construct in psychology. Okay, examples, you want to see another aspects of motivation for Muslims, for example. So you think that when you learn from revealed knowledge, that sincerity, okay, doing something sincerely or honestly, so this will also contribute to Muslims' motivations to perform some things. So beside the intrinsic motivation, the extrinsic motivations, which are already being conceptualized in the literature, so you want to include this element. Okay, so in this case, using the available tests is not enough, because why? The available tests do not cover the Islamic perspective. So in this case, you may have to broaden the concept. You may have to redefine the concepts. So this goes back to construct clarifications or constructs conceptualizations. So the inspirations to develop a new measure may originate from a lot of sources, okay, a lot of inspirations. Some researchers started with a clear construct or variable in mind. Okay, in other words, the construct is already established, you already have the construct definitions, you already have the theory, so you just want to develop a test. But in other instances, there are people who are inspired to construct a new test for a new phenomena, where the idea emerged from certain behavior or phenomena of the researcher's interest. Okay, example now, okay, just as I mentioned, you want to see in Islam, okay, people, we have the concepts of sincerity, ikhlas, for example, and then is this sincerity of ikhlas also motivates people to perform some things, to help other people, for example. So in this case, we want to reconceptualize, or we want to analyze what are the other constructs in psychology that look into the same perspective. So in this case, we have to broaden, identify, verify, or refine the constructs. So in any case, the test developer need to ensure that they are really understand they are certain of what they want to measure. Okay, what the test is designed to measure. Okay, there are a couple of instances that I can share with you where I think that when I verify or when I evaluate or serve as a content validator, okay, or SME for content validation exercise, I always goes back to the conceptualization, okay, especially on the construct conceptualizations, to see whether the constructs really taps to what it's supposed to measure. One example, when I was doing my PhD previously, so one of your seniors approached me asking me to be one of the SME for her projects. So she has a very noble efforts, very noble intentions, that she wants to develop a test of wasatiyah. Okay, wasatiyah. So it's happened to be at that time, my supervisor asked me to write some things on wasatiyah. Okay, it's a speech by the Prime Minister of that times on the officiating speech for a certain institutions in Malaysia. So I have done my literature search, I've done my content analysis, so I've basically have a foundation and understanding what is wasatiyah. Okay, at that times I understand that wasatiyah is not the same thing as being moderate, okay, being modest, okay, and then wasatiyah is related to excellence. So is my previous understanding of wasatiyah is being moderate. So when these students approach me and I look at her conceptualizations, and I see that she still use the common people understanding of wasatiyah, which is being moderate. And then I asked her, have you refers to certain literature? And then she said that she refers to Qardawi writings on wasatiyah, and she are aware that wasatiyah related to the concept of excellence in Islam. So I asked her, and then why you don't use that aspect in the conceptualizations of wasatiyah in your test? She said that she preferred to use the literal understanding or literal definitions of wasatiyah, which we can find in the Malay literature, which I disagree. Why? Because people or layman understanding of certain concepts may not necessarily capture the psychological concepts, the real meanings of the concepts. So basically, I cannot accept the conceptualizations. So that is one example. Another example, okay, during 2021-2022, okay, right after COVID, so world are experiencing a new trends of workers, okay. So I've read in LinkedIn, and then these two trends first emerged in China, and then it goes to United States, and the rest of the world are experiencing this phenomena right now. Okay, when people have to work from home due to COVID, due to movement restriction order, so people start to value, people start to understand more about work-life balance. So in this case, some people develops quiet quitting. Okay, quiet quitting is a phenomena whereby a worker only wants to perform to their bare minimums. They don't want to accept their full efforts or to give their full commitments to their work. Okay, with the misunderstanding that they are prioritizing work-life balance. So this phenomena is across the world. Okay, even in Malaysia we have it. So when I am interested in this phenomena, so I start to read more on this. And then there are a couple of empirical papers actually explains quiet quitting from work engagement perspectives. So what I'm trying to say here is quiet quitting is not a new phenomena from psychological perspectives. Actually, psychologists already discussed this issue way long before COVID. But they discuss and they term it as low work engagement. So when I look at all of the characteristics of people who have high tendency towards quiet quitting, those are all characteristics that psychologists explain from the low work engagement perspective. So in this case, if we do not embark into construct conceptualizations or construct clarification, we will not be able to know that actually this quiet quitting is low work engagement. Okay, so we may have conducted a very detrimental error in the process of test development. That's why this is very important. Okay, a lot of cases, students do not exhaust or do not really enhance their readings, okay, their understanding of the concepts, so they mix a very preemptive or inconclusive decisions that the test is not available, okay, because it's a new construct. So we really need to improve. So when we do the process of construct clarifications, we at least need to address three main aspects, which are construct definition, attribute classification, and behavior representations. So at least here, when we want to answer, going back to the 14 questions, question number 1 and question number 6, we really need to define the construct that we want to measure. Okay, the construct that we want to develop a new test. Okay, the definitions, the variable understudy from theoretical perspectives. And then we really need to understand how psychological construct refers to as attribute are classified in terms of their types and complexity when developing measurement instruments. In other case, we need to know whether it's unidimension or whether it's multi-dimension. If it's multi-dimensions, how many components the construct have? If one component is only unidimensions, 2 components, 3 components or more, for examples. And then we also need to know the behavior representations, selecting the right behaviors that represents or reflect the underlying constructs that we are interested to measure. So at least we need to clarify these 3 perspectives, okay? Especially if the new construct is newly found, newly developed, so they will not be able to have a proper theoretical foundation. If you have already established construct, then you can always go and refer back to their theoretical foundation, because usually all of these are already explained by their theoretical papers. Okay, having said that, so we need to answer all the 14 questions. We need to assert at least 3 perspectives of the construct, the definitions, the classification, and the representation. So sometimes people forget that these things is not only based on the test developer perspective only. It has to go through a proper process, academic process, rigorous process, because these are the processes, the procedures that points or that helps to establish the validity of the test. Okay, the conceptualization process should be based on academic and intellectual discourse. I repeat, should be based on academic and intellectual discourse. Okay, you cannot depend on your intuition only. You cannot depend on your idea when you read a newspaper. Okay, when you read a newspaper, oh, this is new phenomena, quiet quitting. And then you start to do internet search, and then, oh, there is no concepts, there is no papers discussed about quiet quitting. Okay, all of these are very new phenomena. So you say that this is a new phenomena and you produce a new definition. But in fact, the quiet quittings are already here, but people discuss it in the context of low work engagements. So in this case, in order for us to conceptualize a construct, the test developers should engage in one or more of the following academics or intellectual activities. First is pilot work. So you may need to do some interviews, some preliminary research, some investigation, some content analysis, okay, review of research on the phenomena of your interest. Okay, you can conduct content analysis. At least you have to go to review of research. Okay, you can do critical incidence techniques. Okay, you can do a proper observations, direct observation of the phenomena, or at least you can go and refer to the expert judgment. Okay, you go to and ask other students, or even other postgraduate students, they are not yet experts in those fields. So it requires you to go through academic or intellectual discourse. Okay, these are 6 activities that you can use in order for us to clarify the construct in order to answer the 14 questions. Okay, in fact, all of these 14 questions require us to use either one or more of these academic or intellectual activities.